Welcome back to worship. Hope you had a pleasant afternoon. And we're going to be in Jeremiah chapter 10 for this particular lesson. I've had this text written on one sheet of paper that I've been keeping sermon ideas on for probably 4 or 5 years. But I've had that written on that piece of paper it's probably been down there for a couple of years, and finally getting around to using it. And what a powerful passage that we arrive at here in Jeremiah 10. And I hope that as we go through this lesson in this text, that it's going to be as beneficial and uplifting and solidify your faith as much for you as it has been for me. Because man, I've really enjoyed the study of this particular text. We're gonna begin here in Jeremiah chapter 10, and we're just going to read verses 1 through 10. And we're going to read that right now. Beginning in verse 1, it says, "Hear the word that the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel," Jeremiah speaking. "Thus says the Lord, learn not the way of the nation, nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens, because the nations are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vanity. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of a craftsman. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammer and nails so that it cannot move. Their idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil. Neither is it in them to do good. There is none like you, O Lord. You are great, and your name is great in might. Who would not fear you, O King of the nations? This is your due. For among all the wise ones of the nations and in all the kingdoms, there is none like you. They are both stupid and foolish. The instruction of idols is but wood. Beaten silver is brought from Tarshish and gold from Uphaz. They are the work of craftsmen and the hands of the goldsmith. Their clothing is violet and purple. They are all the work of skilled men. But the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King. At his wrath, the earth quakes, and the nations cannot endure his indignation." I mean, just reading through it, you can get the sense and the power of God, can't you? I mean, when you take God and you compare God to all these other things, right? These create sense. It doesn't make sense. And you begin to wonder, all right, Jeremiah, here we are, very bad times in Israel. How is it possible that the Israelites would ever even consider worshiping something like this? And what Jeremiah does, through the word of the Lord, what he does is he brings it down on a very practical level. I mean, at the root, this is exactly what you're doing. This is what you're worshiping. These are the things that you're claiming are powerful, and you're forgetting who God actually is, what it means to be God, what God represents. As he begins to divulge it's almost comical, to me at least, at these false gods. Because in verse 3, you see that false gods are helpless. They're just completely helpless. For the customs of the peoples are vanity, okay? Vanity, pointless, worthless, right? I was reading, here's a funny story. I was listening to Ecclesiastes as I was weed eating. Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. And I was thinking to myself, you are exactly right, Solomon. Vanity of vanities. And then it started raining, and I was like, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But this is exactly what it is. It's pointless. What's the point of doing this? They are vanity. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe at the hand of a craftsman. What you are doing, you are worshiping a tree. When we think about it, how silly is that? How vain and how helpless is this tree? Apparently the custom was of these nations, it was to find a great tree set up on a hill. And you take down all of the branches and all of the limbs. So what you are left with is a stump, right? Now, it could be a tall stump, but it's a stump of a tree. And they would carve and chisel, and it might look something like what we would call a totem pole. And this is what they would call one of their gods. It is a tree. You chopped it down yourself. How vain do you think it is to worship a tree? How helpless, how completely dependent on you is this tree. Would this tree here in verse 3, would this tree ever be anything other than a tree if man wasn't involved? It wouldn't. Because this God, this so-called God that you're worshiping, without you, it can do nothing. It has no power. It has no ability. It has nothing that it is capable of doing. So we chop down the branches and we worship this stump. How silly is that? You continue reading in verse 4, these things, these vain idols that you're worshiping, they are gloryless, right? They have no glory. They can get no glory. Look at this. They decorate it, right? We cut down this tree and we make this beautiful stump. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammer and nails so that it cannot move. There is no glory. There is no majesty. There is no beauty. As you look at this stump, you begin to peel back. As it deteriorates, you begin to peel back the gold and the silver from around the stump. And what are you left with? Still a stump. You begin to peel back who God is. And you begin to understand, yes, God is this loving God. But his love is manifested in his wrath. His love is manifested in his indignation, his creation. It is manifested in how he works and how he operates, how he loves and cares for you. It's manifested in the cross. You begin to peel back the layers of God, and you just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper. But the stump, on the other hand, would it ever be clothed in splendor? Would it ever have glory? Would it ever be anything but a stump if man wasn't involved? It's still a stump. It's just a stump. This tree, we may think that it is so beautiful. Look at it. It's so beautiful. It just shines with the silver and with the gold, and it's up on this hill, and it just catches the light, and you can see it for a mile. Great. It's a stump. What's the point? Vanity of vanities. You see, at the end of the day, when you look at the stump, it can get no glory. It is gloryless. And you see in verse 5, their idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field. Right? Like scarecrows. We've all seen Wizard of Oz. If you haven't, spoiler alert, there's a scarecrow and he talks. But the scarecrow doesn't have a brain. Right? He has no brain. They are like scarecrows in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. You know why? Because they don't have a brain. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. They are a stump. When you think about who God is, or who this God that you've created is, what you see in verse 5 is that it is powerless. It has no power. It cannot think for itself. It cannot walk by itself. It cannot do good. It cannot do evil. It is a stump. Now, when you think about it like that, well, that's a little silly. Why would anybody ever worship a stump? Don't they know that it's just a stump? Don't they know that a stiff wind's going to blow and it's just going to tear that stump out of the ground? Don't they know that there is no glory, that stump can't do anything good or bad? Don't they know that stump can't speak to them? Don't they know that stump can't save them? Yeah, they should, right? I mean, after all, they made it. But how often do we set up stumps in our life? How often do we hold these things that at the end of the day, a stiff wind's going to just wipe them out? And we hold them and we look at them and we think, oh man, how beautiful, how glorious it is, how wonderful it is to have this thing in my life. Maybe it's a brand new shiny car. Let me warn you, boys and girls, don't ever fall in love with a hunk of metal. You could be sitting in the parking lot and somebody could hurt your poor baby car. Or you could be parked at your house and somebody could drive by and take off a mirror. Don't fall in love with something that is nothing. It could be a beautiful house, and we've got it set up on a hill, and it overlooks, I'll tell you my dream, and it overlooks this pasture of 150 acres, and how beautiful it is with the backdrop of the woods behind it, and how glorious it is. And you just sit up on your porch drinking your sweet tea, and you think, wow, this is great. How beautiful it is up here. And then tomorrow, a tornado comes. There goes your house. There goes the woods. There goes the field. It's all gone. Never fall in love with a piece of wood. Or it could be that we fall in love with our job. And we think about our job. I'm blessed. I'm so grateful for this job. Look at all the things that this job has done for me. Look at how far this job has taken me. Look at all the things that I've been able to do because of this job. And then one day you walk in, you don't have a job. Or the economy crashes. We don't require your services anymore. Far too often we set up stumps in our life, and we build them and we decorate them and we think they are absolutely beautiful, and we center our life around them, and then a stiff wind comes and blows over the stump and our life crashes around it. Why would you ever worship a stump? Why would you ever build a stump in your life and decorate it and make it beautiful when at the end of the day it's just a stump? And then we keep reading. That's the stump. That's the false gods, right? The second half of this text that we've looked at is, this is God. There is none like you, O Lord. You are great, and your name is great in might. And verse 7 and verse 8, we see God is intelligent. Who would not fear you, O King of the nations? For this is your due. For among all the wise ones of the nations and in their kingdoms, there is none like you. They are both stupid and foolish. The instruction of idols is but wood. Who would not? God is intelligent. As opposed to this stump that we have in our life that can give us nothing. And then at the end of the day, it produces nothing for us. God, on the other hand, is absolutely intelligent. And what God can offer you in verse 7 or verse 8 is wisdom. Who would not follow you? Who would not want to be a part of God? This is what God has to offer. They are stupid and foolish. That is the instruction. This is what idols can give you. This idol, this stump that you've set up in your life. This is what it can give you. In verse 8, it can give you wood. Wood. That's literally all it can give you. You can take away the silver, and you can take away the gold and the tax, and you can take away all those things, and you can have firewood. That's what it can give you. What can God give you? God can give you wisdom. God can direct your steps. God can guide your path. God can stabilize your feet. With God, you can have this. God is intelligent. And then if we keep reading, we see in verse 8 and verse 9 that God is, He is the creator. They are both stupid and foolish. The instruction of idols is but wood. Beaten silver is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz. They are the work of the craftsman in the hands of the goldsmith. Their clothing is violet and purple, and they are all the work of skilled men. But the Lord is a true God. He is a living God, the everlasting King. At His wrath the earth quakes, and the nations cannot endure His indignation. God is the creator, as opposed to this thing that we have set up in our life, this stump in our life that we have made, that we have created, that we have etched, and that we have decorated and made beautiful. God is the creator rather than being created. God is the one that creates. You see? These people, they bring gold from far off places. They bring silver from far off places. God created the gold. God created the silver. God created the tree that you've cut down and that you've worshiped. God is the creator. And then elaborating a little bit more on it in verse 10, it says, but the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King. God is true. God is living. God is everlasting. God is the true God. What you've been worshiping all this time, Israel, what you've been worshiping all this time and what you've put in place of God, that's not real. It's fake. It can't do anything. And at the end of the day, it doesn't care. It can't care whether you live or whether you die. God is the true God. There is no other God besides me, God says. God is the living God, as opposed to this God that you have made that cannot, as we've already talked about, that cannot walk, that cannot talk, that cannot think for itself. God is living. God is alive, and God does care. I'm amazed every time I think about the Exodus from Egypt. All right, you've got, what, million people, maybe? I think we're told like 600,000 men leaving Egypt. Wow, what an exodus, right? So these people are leaving, and you know what? God cares where they go. God cares about them. You know why? Because God is true and that God is living, and He is proving it. He proved it in the plagues, and He's proving it as He leads them, listen to me, by a cloud. How many people would be in the desert? You know, let's follow that cloud. God's living. The cloud moved, the people moved. And then they come to the Red Sea. You think that God didn't know where He was taking them? You think God got to the sea and was like, oh man, we took a wrong turn. We need to go back. Sorry, guys. I don't think so. All night and all day, the Lord drove back the sea. You remember? All night and all day, all night, the Lord drove back the sea. And the cloud stood in between the 600,000 men and the army of the Egyptians. How? He's living. He's alive. Egypt, you worship this sun god. You worship this thing, this idol that is not alive, but God is proving that He is alive. Over and over and over again, we see that God is truly alive and that God is everlasting. He's everlasting. Gold and silver, guess what? It's going to tarnish. It's going to fade. It's going to rust. it's going to be destroyed. It's not going to last forever. You know those commercials. Y'all need to be worried about this economy. You need to buy gold. Everybody needs to stock up on gold. Call 1-800-GET-YOUR-GOLD. Right? Y'all seen those commercials? It's true. All right. Our economy isn't going to last forever. The nation of America is not going to last forever. Let me tell you, neither is gold. Just like everything else, one day gold's going to be burned up. It's not going to be here anymore. I love how he says about himself, the everlasting King. Everlasting King. You see, God is not just a God. God demands to be king. You understand what I'm saying? Because as he led the Egyptians to their destruction, and subsequently the Israelites to their victory, God demands to be king. Because God set up his kingdom as a theocracy. Nobody voted, God is king. But this theocracy, it only works when God is king individually. Because God can claim to be king as a nation over all the nation. But if he isn't God of each individual person, then it's not going to work. We're going to end with verse 6, right there in the middle as we transition between the false God and the real God. When he says, "There is none like you, O Lord. You are great and your name is great in might." There is none like God. God is great. Well, the question is he great in your life? Does he control your life? Is he king over your life? If he's not, I want to encourage you to get right with God. If you haven't been baptized, now's the time to get baptized. If you're not walking according to his will, now's the time to start. If you need God to be king in your life, please do so as we stand and sing.